Hello, we are in chapter 26 of Deuteronomy, and uh, it's a little complex seemingly, but I promise we're going to be able to make it make sense. Mostly because you've seen all the videos up to now, you've studied this, you see the patterns, you will understand why these things fit where they fit. And we'll get to that right after we read Deuteronomy chapter 26 in the New Living Translation. But I'm going to start in the Complete Jewish Bible because I like the way it starts. Well, never mind. So, verse 1 says, "When you have come to the land Adonai your God is giving you as your inheritance, take possession of it and taken possession of it and settled there, you are to take the first fruits of all the crops the ground yields, which you will harvest from your land, that Adonai your God is giving you, put them in a basket, and go to the place where Adonai your God will choose to have his name live." This is the New Living Translation. "When you enter the land the Lord your God is giving you as a special possession, and you have conquered it and settled there, put some of the first produce from each crop you harvest into a basket and bring it to the designated place of worship, the place the Lord your God chooses for his name to be honored." And the reason that's important because it says put some of the first produce instead of the first fruits from the first fruits festival that he talked about. So if you didn't know that and you only read the English version, you wouldn't know those two had any relation, or they're basically the same. They are the same thing. They're just using different words to take more of that Jewishness out of the Bible and to disconnect it from the law. So let's jump into verse 3. "Go to the priest in charge at that time and say to him, with this gift I acknowledge to the Lord your God that I have entered the land he swore to our ancestors he would give us. The priest will then take the basket from your hand and set it before the altar of the Lord your God. You must then say in the presence of the Lord your God, my ancestor Jacob was a wandering Aramaean who went to live as a foreigner in Egypt. His mother arrived few in number. His family, I don't know where I got mother from. His family arrived few in number, but in Egypt they became a large and mighty nation. When the Egyptians oppressed and humiliated us by making us slaves, we cried out to the Lord, the God of our ancestors. He heard our cries and saw our hardship, toil, and oppression. So the Lord brought us out of Egypt with a strong hand and a powerful arm, with overwhelming terror and with miraculous signs and wonders. He brought us to this place and gave us this land flowing with milk and honey." And that's just an idiom for, prosperous. It's a fertile place. It's a great place. So, "And now, O Lord, I have brought you to the first portion of the harvest you have given me from the ground. Then place the produce before the Lord your God and bow to the ground and worship before him." So notice too, it says the first portion, not first fruits, even though literally in the Hebrew it says first fruits, but it's separating the harvest festivals with Christianity, so to speak, English. So afterward, you may go and celebrate because of all the good things the Lord your God has given to you and your household. Remember to include the Levites and the foreigners living among you in the celebration. So remember, this was already a celebration. Like once you went to do the first fruits festival, you were to celebrate. We learned all of this by studying the law. But when it's said like that, hey, after you're done with this kind of ritual, this requirement, then you can go have fun. And instead of pointing out that the whole festival, and the people reading this would have been thinking first fruits festival, they wouldn't have thought, oh, we get to have a party afterwards. The whole thing's a party. The whole thing's a celebration. So every third year, you must offer a special tithe of your crops. And this year of the special tithes, you must give your tithes to the Levites, foreigners, orphans, and widows, so that they will have enough to eat in your towns. And remember, we studied that too. So then you must declare in the presence of the Lord your God, I have taken the sacred gift from my house and given it to the Levites, foreigners, orphans, and widows, just as you commanded me. I have not violated or forgotten any of your commands. So these are commands. These are laws. But when we word it like that, we make it sound like we did everything we're supposed to do instead of using the words that God said use and doing it the way God said do it. We kind of leave that part up to our discretion, and God did not do that. So I have not eaten any of it while in mourning. I have not handled any of it while I was ceremonially unclean, and I have not offered any of it to the dead. I have obeyed the Lord my God and have done everything you commanded me. Earlier, in an earlier chapter, in the law. So now look down from your holy dwelling place in heaven and bless your people Israel and the land you swore to our ancestors to give us, a land flowing with milk and honey. And over in the complete Jewish version, it says, "You are to say in the presence of Adonai your God, I have rid my house of the things set aside for God and given them to the Levites, the foreigner, the orphan, and the widow, in keeping with every one of your mitzvot you gave me, every one of your commands. So I haven't eaten any of this food when mourning. I haven't put any of it aside when unclean, nor have I given any of it for the dead. I have listened to what Adonai my God has said, and I have done everything you ordered me to do." So remember, if you're reading this and you didn't study the earlier Torah, you're like, what does that mean for the dead? You wouldn't have known about those tunnels and how they would send food down to them. So today, the Lord has commanded you to obey all these decrees and regulations. So be careful to obey them wholeheartedly. I don't know why we think we don't have to do any of this, but you have declared today that the Lord is your God, and you have promised to walk in his ways and obey his decrees, commands, and regulations, and to do everything he tells you. The Lord has declared today that you are his people, his own special treasure, just as he promised that you must obey all his commands. And if you do, he will set you high above all the other nations he has made. Then you will receive praise, honor, and renown. You will be a nation that is holy to the Lord your God, just as he promised. And the complete Jewish Bible, and I think this matters, it says, and that he will raise you high above all the nations he has made in praise, reputation, and glory, and that, as he said, you will be a holy people for Adonai, our God, your God. So what he's saying is, when we change that to nation, then we make it sound like this is just Israel. But anyone that is a part of the covenants of Israel is part of Israel spiritually. We've studied that. So let's break some of this down. What does it mean? So this is really a section that is called about true religion, doing things the way God wants them done. So there's a warning of disasters if they fail to follow the covenant of Moses. And covenant renewal ceremonies were to ensure that the people understood that, and they're going to do those. So chapters 26 through 30 really go into a lot of deeper mysteries. So we need to get comfortable with not understanding or not seeing his purpose yet. I talk a lot about my 7-year-old grandson, and he doesn't like me saying, I don't know. But there are things that I don't know. Now, granted, sometimes I just make it up, but I don't want to do that with the Bible. There are mysteries that are mysteries, and we just have to deal with it. Some things God didn't want us to know yet for whatever reason, and we got to be okay with that part too. So we find declarations that each worshiper is to recite when bringing their first fruits to the tabernacle. This prayer is similar to the Lord's Prayer, and it's important because when we take out words like first fruits and tabernacle, we make it sound like it's all disconnected from what we're doing right now. So the person has to declare, I acknowledge that this day before the Lord your God, that I have entered the land that the Lord swore to our fathers to assign us. The meaning is this: I stand today to say I believe this is the fulfillment of the Abrahamic covenant. They're acknowledging this covenant has been fulfilled. So does that mean everybody get off the land now and the land goes away? Because for some reason we think that when Jesus came along and fulfilled another meaning of the covenant, he made the previous ones go away and we don't have to worry about them anymore. But that doesn't happen with covenants. So The land that was promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob has been given. It's finished. So the connection is that without the land, there would be no first fruits to give. So the only reason you're able to bring this is because of that. The Lord intends that every Hebrew identify himself with the land as though he was the first one there. So if you watch people get off the plane sometimes in Israel, and we did this because I thought it was really cool, is they kiss the ground, because it's a way of just kind of acknowledging that every time's the first time. It's like your first love, the first, a child's eyes when they see something. It's like, it's just symbolic, and that's where that comes from. Not a law. God didn't say do it. It's just one of those things. So the worshiper acknowledges Israel began as nothing special. My father was a nomad from Aram. So each Israelite declares their association to the patriarchs who were from Aram, A-R-A-M, or Aram. It's declared Jacob's clan went down to Egypt and became a large nation. So the Lord rescued Israel. God moved Israel to the land he had set aside. And since God owns all things and created all things that grow in the promised land, they're God's property. So that's why he says, don't steal God's property. The festive meal eaten near the sanctuary is required. So when we read the English version that says, then afterwards go out and have a meal with people, it's actually part of the law. It's a requirement to have a meal and have fun with all these people. So the Levites were invited, even the Gur, the foreigners, the Gentiles, they were invited because it helps Israel remember the experience of being a foreigner, being new. I talk a lot, businesses and churches, about you need that new person's perspective, because you forgot what it's like to be in church for the first time. Some of us started church when we were like 2-3 years old. We don't remember going to a church for the first time. That's important. I don't know why I say that's important. Everything's important, right? No, not really. Just God's word. But one of these instructions is that after they enter the promised land, a declaration by each Israelite that his own identity is in Israel's redemption history. So part of that kissing the ground is to identify with this. I'm part of this history, and it matters to me. I follow the God of Israel. I don't follow the American God or some other God. It's the God of Israel. So there are only a few places in Torah where the individual is really highlighted. Each Israelite must identify, though, in this situation, his identification with the God of Israel. So, in the redemption that Jehovah has given. And so that's why, I can't accept Christ for other people. Each one of us has to identify as a follower of Jesus the Christ, the Messiah, the Son of the God of Israel. That's why. So later when let's hear. So later when the apostles were out teaching, Paul argued that the Messianic community of believers, they should support them, because this was not instead of the temple, this was in addition to their normal temple offering. In verse 12, this is what's called the poor tithe. So every third year, a Hebrew's tithe was set aside in the local village. So to restock the warehouses for the poor and the needy, and it just kind of became known as the poor tithe. This is when you tithe basically for the poor. The Israelites eventually kind of got tired of doing this and obeying God in their financial life, and so they modified the regulation. The temple didn't like losing money every third year, because you wouldn't take it to the temple, you would take it to your local warehouse, and also not controlling the giving to the poor. So about a century before Yeshua, a high priest named John Hyrcanus, he was an illegitimate high priest, but he declared that the poor tithe was abolished. So the modern church followed this decree, basically. Members' tithe and offerings all come to the local church, and then leadership decides how to spend them. And I've said that for years, and I'm not sure I feel that way anymore. That we should give to the local church, absolutely 100%. But I don't think all our tithes and offerings should go to the local church. Some you should give directly to needs that you see. So that's how I feel now. Having read the Torah and really studied it, God convicted me that I was wrong on that one. So I've reversed. So when giving the poor tithe, the worshiper is to make a declaration that to the Lord like a vow. That he states that he's held nothing back. And that's really important, because when we give to God, be it a tithe or an offering or to the poor, whatever it is you do, make sure you're not holding anything back. Give your whole heart and ask God to search your heart. If I don't think I've holding anything back, but if I am, check me, search me, tell me, show me. So this is about the danger of dealing with God's holy property too. Those who misuse his holy property usually suffer death. So part of the reason for this vow is with the poor tithe, a lot could be done in secret. We could give our worst clothing away or our worst produce away. Some would give less than their best, good enough. It's good enough for the Salvation Army, or it's good enough for a homeless, and he knew he was given the least value. So God was saying, hey, when you do it, make a vow to me that this really is your best. Now, I'm going to know. I just want to see if you're being honest with yourself. So, like I said, it also included him saying he didn't handle it while he was unclean, because he has not defiled it. That's why he says that. So none of the produce was given to dead people either. And like I said, you wouldn't know that if you didn't study with us, that grave sites were usually included a tunnel or a hole that they could contact the dead, give them food and stuff like that. This was pure superstition. They learned this in pagan religions. But contact with the gravesite would have defiled the worshiper. So what he was saying really is, I haven't been near any grave sites. So Moses says that the key to pleasing God is to follow his rules with all your heart and soul. So if you've ever asked or heard somebody say, I just wished I knew how to please God, it's loving him with all your heart and soul. And that means obeying him. That's what he considers love. It's not a feeling, it's an action. Obey. So this reminds us of the great commandment that supports all the other commandments, to love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength. Again, quoting Deuteronomy. So submit to the direction of the Lord at all times. That's basically what that's saying. Verses 17, 18, and 19 demonstrate the nature of the covenant relationship between Israel and Jehovah by the Mosaic covenant. And these verses finalize the terms. This is the wrap up, the signature day, Then a summary of what each side has agreed to. So I think we tell people it's easy to follow God when we mean it's easy to accept Christ. It's not easy to follow God. It's easy to accept Christ and start. But it's like a marathon. Every race is easy to start. It's the race part of it that's hard. The starting point, anybody can do that. It's running the race. That's what God wants us to do. And only when we focus, when we follow God in our heart, when our relationship with him is the focus of our life, in love and submission, then, after redemption, doing the commandments has value. It helps us. Only then. When our heart's dedicated to God and our mind, and we want to submit to him, and then we accept the redemption he provides through his son, Jesus Christ, then we can do the commandments. So if you struggle with that, ask yourself, have I totally submitted to him? If he's given me something to do or not do, am I doing it? That's it. That's all you got to ask yourself. And if not, ask him to show you. Ask him to help you. So before the law, the Torah, was given, Israel was redeemed out of Egypt. So God didn't say, here, let me give you the law, and then we'll see how you do. He said, once I've redeemed you and saved you, show me your gratitude by following my way of living. So the pattern is redemption and then obedience to the commandments. There's nothing else to be obedient to other than God's law. That's what he says. So it was that way in the Old Testament, and it remains that way today. Yes, accepting Jesus Christ determines whether you spend eternity with God. But obeying God determines whether you're living for him now. What are you doing with your life? What are you doing with the redemption? That's what he was teaching in the desert. I redeemed you. What are you going to do with it? Well, we're just going to wander around and complain. We're going to do our best rather than just live for you. And 40 years, they walked in circles. Think about it. God bless. Share this with a friend, because people like other people that are cool enough to share videos about Deuteronomy. It'll make you popular. Love God, love people, and change the world.